Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this week's State of the Market Update. So let's get into the outbound tender volume for the United States of America, and you'll notice two things right away. First of all, why yes, we did change our logo just a little bit, just to be a little more uniform in lines with what we're trying to do. The second thing you'll notice is, other than this slight bump a week ago in volume, we are still kind of just trailing along this 9,700 mark, and it does seem rather boring on a national point of view, but I want to take you on a ride and show you some cool markets that have actually are surging in volume and doing some interesting things. So I wanted to go over to the map first and show you. This is one of the things I was talking about last week. Hopefully you saw it. Maybe you played around with it in SONAR or saw it on our webinar last week. Instead of the white to dark blue, from now we've got some of our indexes have negative values, like this market share I have pulled up here. So you can actually see if an area is losing market share, or white would be more neutral. Obviously dark blue is positive, the most positive in relation to everything else. It's just a lot easier to look at. So Atlanta would seem like it is growing in market share, but if you're really observant, you noticed our second feature is actually the ability to change the date. So you can now go back to the future or back to the present. So look at the West Coast here. You're looking at Los Angeles and Ontario. This is really an area that has been spiking and has had a capacity crunch. Even into Fresno has actually seen some volumes come up, and the rejections are coming quickly behind. So let's go to the next chart. I wanted to show you a couple things about Ontario. Now I've got Ontario's outbound tender volume pulled up, and you can see, like, since the beginning of October we keep hitting new highs. In fact, this morning I looked, it's yesterday's data, it's the 5th, and it hit another new high. Here's another interesting point. This green line right here is actually the volume in Atlanta, and typically Atlanta is usually like number one with market volume or market share, but earlier this week Ontario surpassed Atlanta to take the number one spot in the volume index. Let's go down to the next slide here. Okay, this is another thing I wanted to show you. The FreightWaves Baltic Index. Essentially what this is, to kind of look at where the volume is shifting around in the country. What this index is the price to bring a 40-foot container from China to the U.S. So this index actually takes the price from China to the East Coast and subtracts China to the West Coast. So this is something we've actually been looking at recently. You'll see last week we actually had, what this means is it was less than $800 more to ship something to the East Coast than it was the West Coast. So why is that important, and how does it affect you? Essentially, if you're bringing freight into the country and you're going to store it in a warehouse in Baltimore, Chicago, or Atlanta, you can't really get a truck from Long Beach on the West Coast all the way over here on the East Coast for less than $800. So even though the transit time is typically a couple weeks longer going to the East Coast, a lot of people are shipping into the East Coast because of the cost savings. Essentially, it did spike up a little bit here, but it's still less than $1,000. And this is another index that we have created that basically takes the spread between two of our indices. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is this is called the head haul index, which, if you remember, we take the outbound volume and subtract the inbound volume. So Savannah, Georgia is primarily where the containers coming in. This is where it will affect the market. So what this head haul index means is basically since the middle of October, you've got a lot more outbound volume going into Savannah than you do have coming out. So if you're a carrier looking for a backhaul, then this is a good market to go into, because right now it's it's basically at all-time highs in the last several months. So you can get a good load back out of Savannah. Tomorrow's our webinar at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, Wednesday. Next week, we will be in Grapevine, Texas for our FreightWaves 18 event. And the week after that is Thanksgiving, so keep that in mind. We will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and then we'll be off for a couple weeks. and see you after the holidays. Thanks again for watching, guys.